I'm Mark Tokola, Vice President of KEI. Then we have Mi-Suk Lee, who is news editor of Moonhwa Daily News, William Brown, adjunct professor, Georgetown University, Chon Soom Nam, editorial writer and political reporter from Dong-A Ilbo, Mr. Andrew Weber, Deputy Coordinator for Ebola Response, U.S. Department of State, and Kang-Duk Lee, Washington Bureau Chief of KBS News. I'm going to ask each of our discussants to spend maybe 5 minutes making observations. And if we can do that, then we'll have some time for some questions and answers. So please keep track of your questions as you work down the line. We'll just do it in order. So if I could ask Mi-Suk Lee first. I think you're hooked up to your microphone there.
Yes. Can you hear me? Yes, good to see you. It's my great honor to talk with you. On the upcoming summit with ROK and US, Mr. Kim Chang-gi and Ha Tae-won already explained what is the background and what is the best, what is the worst. I want to explain my observation on the two Kim Chang-gi and Ha Tae-won's presentation. In generally speaking, some assumption in US and ROK, South Korea under Park Geun-hye government is getting closer to China. That means that might undermine the US and ROK 60 years relation, the alliance. But I think you must think about the first woman president in Korea, Park Geun-hye's kind of privilege or her unique position. I think Park Geun-hye managed the relation with China very well, and then she managed the US and ROK relation very well. It's very unique and very specific phenomenon, in my opinion. When you think about the Kim Dae-jung government and Roh Moo-hyun government, both liberal presidents, they closer to China and try to make more relation and cooperation with China rather than US. So there are so many problems under Kim Dae-jung government and Roh Moo-hyun government, like Mr. Ha Tae-won explained to the first session. But in Park Geun-hye government, it's quite different. She managed very well the China relation. As you all saw, the early September, she attended the military parade in Beijing. There is no tension in between ROK and US. So I think US and Korea have to use this specific situation under Park Geun-hye government. Under Park Geun-hye government, US relation with ROK and ROK relation with China is both is very, very nice. So we have to use the momentum under this summit. So my suggestion is the 3 points. When we think about each president legacy, what will be remained in our presidents? As you know, the U.S. presidential election is next year, and South Korea's presidential election is 2017. So basically, there is no more time for Obama and Park Geun-hye. So this summit is the truly meaningful, the last summit to make something in between two presidents. So I think the upcoming U.S. ROK summit, President Park Geun-hye and President Obama have to think about what will be their legacy in terms of Korean Peninsula and North Korea nuclear issues. Second, my suggestion is the relation between China, ROK, Korea is very nice under Park Geun-hye government. I hope President Park Geun-hye will suggest kind of trilateral meeting with Korea, US, China to deal with North Korea issues and peaceful unification of Korea Peninsula. It would be a good momentum in this summit. And then to enhance US-ROK relation, as Kim Chang-gi mentioned, the Japan issue is very critical to Korea. But most Americans, United States, think history is just history. They do not understand the critical meaning of the history. So U.S. have to think about again how to mend, how to constructive role in between Japan and Korea issues. That would be very helpful to enhance U.S.-ROK alliance. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Lee. That was admirably to the point and specific. Ms. William Brown.
Yes, just a couple of quick points on the two earlier presentations, which I thought were great. I quite agree with Mr. Kim's focus on North Korea. I think that's the elephant in the room, as we say. The Japan part, I don't know. It's hard in a bilateral summit to talk about a third party. Maybe not even be quite appropriate. It'd be quite appropriate in a trilateral summit. Hopefully they'll have something like that. The Mr. Ha's presentation, the one thing that I liked it a lot, the one thing that made me nervous, you said 62 years is a long alliance. I'm just turned 64, and I first went to Korea when I was 2 years old, which is about 62 years ago, about at the birth of the alliance. Believe me, I was very, very young at that point. So I quite agree, though, with your point that it's a long alliance and it needs to be constantly reconstructed in a way. I have a little paper. I won't read through it because it's taken too much time, but you can look at it. Let me just go through several points that I'd like to make about this summitry. First of all, for y'all in Washington, you'll know this, but in Korea you may not. Washington is a bit summited out at this point. We've had a flurry of summits, especially the papal visit was amazing. I was actually in Korea, but I heard all the news. And then astonishingly, Xi Jinping was here last week. Everybody forgotten it, right? It was not, didn't even, here's the president of China, wow, and it didn't even make the front, maybe it barely made the front page of the newspaper. So be prepared for a low visibility summit. Now that to me, though, is not bad news. In fact, I would argue from history of summitry and my own work in the government forever, is that a low visibility summit is a good time to get real stuff done because you don't have to speak so much to the public. The two leaders obviously know each other by now quite well. They don't need to work on that. To me, the third audience of a summit is really the governments. Maybe this is from a bureaucrat's standpoint, but they have especially President Obama has a chance here in the next year to really get his government working to solve some long-term problems with Korea. And I would say the same for Park Geun-hye. So it's a good time for them to sort of knock heads and try to plan out exactly what their own governments should be doing on some very critical issues. The three critical issues that I can think of is pretty easy. Maybe about a month ago, I woke up purposefully at 2 in the morning, looked at the internet, because I was, China's stock market was plummeting the night before, really crashing. I was very worried about Asian contagion. I'm an economist. I look at the economies. I was very worried about another contagion event, like we've seen before. Moreover, I'm a North Korea specialist, so North Korea that had said, I think an hour before I turned on the internet, they had set a deadline for a retaliation against your speakers on the DMZ. So I'm thinking, wow, these two events happening one night, a crashing stock market in China and possible DMZ hostility. What I did was looked at the COPC stock exchange, 2 in the morning, looked at it. Stock market is down 2%, but it's stabilized. Well, considering all that was going on, that's not that bad, so I went back to sleep. That evening, though, represents to me the 3 critical points that these two leaders need to be talking about. One, absolutely, as you said, North Korea. This is not going away, it's getting worse. Secondly, China. Now, I've just been in China, and people were asking me, what do you think about the parade? I said, well, you know, the parade is fine. We know Park Geun-hye is there, and that's fine. That's all fine. But, you know, we Americans, at least me, we think we had a little bit to do with this ending of the war with Japan. And frankly, we don't think you, at least the communist government, had much at all to do with it. And, you know, they took those kind of comments very well. They said, you know, kind of, well, we kind of thought you would say that. But it gets to the point of Park Geun-hye's visit there, and that plus the AIIB venture earlier in the summer, where the U.S. has stayed out of that bank. In both cases, though, the Obama administration has given plenty of room for Park Geun-hye to, you know, as if it's our room to play, to allow her to do that and to praise her for doing that. A lot of room, with the idea basically that South Korea is building some kind of political capital with China that will allow it to help solve the North Korea problem, and something we haven't talked about, the Chinese economic problem that can overwhelm all of us. So those two issues, I think President Obama is fine with Park Geun-hye going to that summit, but given its political capital, I would say now with this summit, it's time to start spending that capital. I would argue that President Park should start spending that capital, proving to us, and more importantly to the Chinese, that they will be onto the Chinese for helping solve this North Korea problem, A, and B, helping to create a true market economy, open market economy in China. So I think on the all parts, what I'm thinking is what they should be talking about, North Korea. And one other thing about North Korea I failed to mention, North Korea may do this on its own. I mean, all this is talk about maybe doing a satellite launch or missile Taepodong launch October 10th, which is what, Saturday, Sunday? And don't forget, October 9th is the 9th anniversary of their first nuclear explosion. So 2 big issues coming up here even before the summit takes place next week. They may do something provocative that, you know, trumps the triumph, the summit. Now, I would suggest, though, to President Park and President Obama that they kind of ignore that provocation, whether it happens or not. I'm not convinced it will happen. I would not give them credit for not doing it because there's a continuing provocation that we've all become inured to. A year ago, Pyongyang announced they were restarting their Yongbyon plutonium reactor. Then a few months ago, they said, it's going, it's working. This means that North Korea is producing fissile material, plenty of it, both plutonium and HEU, for nuclear weapons. And that is really a dangerous, obviously a dangerous situation. That's a continuing provocation that we're not reacting to, that I think the 2 presidents need to focus like a laser on that particular problem. Unification is fine, but that's not going to happen in their tenure. So for the unification, I think they should be setting up their own governments to start solving some of these problems. But the immediate problem, I think, is that North Korean nuclear program, the Chinese play in that, and the Chinese financial situation. That's kind of my take on the.
Okay, thank you, Bill. It's a good list of specifics, things we don't pay attention to all the time, but should. So thank you for that. Mr. Nam Chan-soo.
Yes, my name is Nam Chan-soo. I was told by the Mr. Ambassador An Ho-young, yes, I covered the Foreign Ministry of Korea nearly 40 years ago. So I'm very old now. So I just surprised at my junior's representation with a computer. But I'll try my best. But now I'm very sorry. I cannot speak English very well. Mr. William Brown. Anyway, according to my experience, the summit between two countries are very symbolic. Now everything has been decided by the high officials in Blue House or White House. So even though the summit between President Park and Mr. Obama I'm sure that there's no surprise of the contents. Anyway, the situation around the Korean Peninsula were well described by Mr. Kim and Mr. Ha. And it's a very fitting analysis of environment or situation happening in Korean Peninsula. But I would like to change the angle to watch what will happen in Korean Peninsula, relating to the China, United States, and Korea. Now, Mr. Brown already told, frankly speaking, that Washington is a little nervous to see the close relationship with China and South Korea. Is that right?
Well, nervous, we're interested. Put it that way. From a distance, sort of looking, what's going to happen next?
And the most important thing is the reunification problem. Now, most of the Korean people recently have a belief of reunification because of the environmental changes around the Korean Peninsula. So let's suppose like this. We are step in the process of unification process. Then what will happen? How? What kind of way the US and China will have? Now, it's very interesting. Even the President Xi Jinping had some kinds of agreements and conference about the problem in Korean Peninsula with Geun-hye, but he did not mention directly to North Korea. The term North Korea, he did not directly mention it. I think that is because of his inner mind, that China will not cut the ties with North Korea. So, okay, now it's the process of reunification. United States is certain to stand on Seoul side. Then China, Beijing, where is the place they can stand? Beijing and Washington could cooperate to make the reunification very peacefully. Yes, it could be cooperating. But, there are many national selfish interests. either of United States or China. Mr. Brown already mentioned, the Korea has a posture to cooperative of establishing AIIB.
AIB.
AIB, okay. At that time, what was the response of the Washington? I think there could be a influence competition on Korean Peninsula. Now, okay, Washington and Beijing could cooperate, could have the cooperation and talk freely for the benefits of Korean Peninsula and peace and stability in Northeastern Asia. But I think it is a kind of non-fiction. International situation is very, the realistic and pragmatic. We can see this kind of evidence right now. So the process of reunification of Korea will intensify the rivalry between China and United States. So in this session, I would like to ask the famous American panelist, what is the United States, the U.S. position at this stage? And the other one is, in Korea, many people think that United States, because of the reason I just told you, has not great interest in Korean problem. They are interested more in Syria or Iran. That makes more alienated the relationship between two countries. So it's just a second question.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Nam. Most native English speakers I know can't put things as clearly as you do.
Thank you.
Mr. Weber.
Yeah. Thank you, Mark. In addition to the Ebola job, which I left the administration this summer, so I'm able to speak freely, which is a wonderful opportunity. So thank you for inviting me today. I was President Obama's Assistant Secretary of Defense for Nuclear, Chemical, and Biological Defense Programs, and very involved in weapons of mass destruction issues, strengthening our bilateral cooperation on these issues with Korea through an exercise series that we created, an annual series called Able Response, and it focused on bioterrorism. We need to remember that weapons of mass destruction is not just nuclear weapons, but we have to be very concerned about the North Korean chemical and biological weapons programs and the potential for especially covert delivery short of a full wartime scenario of biological weapons. So that's why this exercise to strengthen our preparedness together against bioterrorism by working across sectors. The Korean CDC and Health Ministry was very involved in this, as well as the Ministry of National Defense, the Korean military, intelligence, law enforcement, and disaster response authorities working together with their American counterparts and Australian counterparts, and even beyond that, developed a good model for multi-sectoral cooperation against these global threats, which then grew into what is now called the Global Health Security Agenda. Ambassador Ahn was a real hero in this. On a day when the U.S. government was closed, the snow was almost a meter deep. We had our launch in Washington, and it has grown. We had the White House event last September, and then on 9 September in Seoul, President Park hosted the high-level meeting on global health security. Over 50 countries and international organizations participated in that, and they released the Seoul Declaration on Global Health Security. And this is just an example of Korea's global influence on the world stage beyond these regional issues that we're focused on. But the weapons of mass destruction situation in North Korea is indeed a global issue. And I think that if you look at states that have WMD programs, Iraq no longer has one, Libya no longer has one, the Syrian chemical weapons stockpile was eliminated through a global cooperation with the United Nations, and now we have the Iran agreement, which included working together with China and Russia to deny Iran a nuclear weapon. So I think we need to think of the situation with weapons of mass destruction in North Korea as a global issue, and think about all the countries that are involved and supportive of your position on this and strengthening your preparedness against this indeed global threat. The government of Korea announced during the high-level global health security meeting on the 9th of September that it was going to contribute $100 million to assist 13 countries around the world in strengthening their global health security capacity. And this is a meaty demonstration of Korea playing an important role, not just regionally, but globally. So I think that is a good preface to what we hope next week will be the best summit ever. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. You know, I left government service a year ago, and I still don't feel I can speak freely. So you're ahead of me. Last but by no means least, Mr. Lee Kong-duk, please.
There were a lot of good. Oh, I need mic. Okay. I heard a lot of good proposals made by two speakers, and I want to narrow my focus on the one issue already mentioned by Mr. Andrew Eber, North Korea's weapons of mass destruction, especially nuclear issue. This summit should be the beginning of the momentum for the resolution of the North Korean nuclear issue. So this summit must focus on that issue. So I want to make a very simple proposal or suggestion for the president, especially my suggestion is going to President Obama. Already the two speakers made a lot of suggestions and proposals for the President Park. So this time I want to make just a simple suggestion going to the President Obama. President Obama need to send a letter to the chairman of North Korea, Kim Jong-un. If we send the letter to Kim Jong-un, I think there will be some change. We can make some change on this current impasse. President Obama already showed the model case with the Iranian leaders to make some progress on the nuclear issue. He sent the letter to the Iranian leaders. After receiving the letter, there was some movement among the Iranian leaders. So after this summit, I think it is very important for President Obama would send the letter to the Kim Jong-un. The content of the letter doesn't matter. He can write the things regarding some reprimand or criticism or request for the returning of the dialogue. I don't think the content of the letter does matter. So if President Obama send the letter and then South Korean President Madam Park will conquer that, and then I think she can show some support on that movement. Maybe this time, I think it's the last chance for President Obama to show some kind of new line of new initiative on this North Korean nuclear issue. So that's my simple point. So I want to hear the comment on this issue with my colleague. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. We've heard some extremely thoughtful comments from all of the panelists, and if our two presidents heard you, they would benefit from it. So I hope they were listening. President Park Geun-hye has spoken about the economic bonanza that will come from unification. I've got some very interesting remarks I've prepared on the diplomatic bonanza, but I'm not going to give them to you because time is too short. So you can read them on our website, www.keia.org, in about a week on our Peninsula blog. So I'm going to stop right there. KEI tries hard to end programs on time because we respect your time, but I don't want to cheat you out of the chance to ask our terrific panelists some questions too. So please, if you have a question, raise your hand, say where you're from, make it in the form of a question rather than a speech, and I'll ask our panelists to make some succinct answers. And we'll take time for maybe 2 or 3 questions. Okay, do I have a first question, please? And if not, we can wrap up as we are. Well, here's a question.
Hi, I'm Julia Oh from National Bureau of Asian Research. I have a question for Dr. Brown and also from Mr. Nam. I was quite surprised when the Yonhap reported about who's going to attend the North Korea's Workers' Party establishment from the China side, which was the Liu Winshen. Who's quite a high official than everybody else suspected. So because it looks like there's some general idea in South Korean media that the Park and the China's relationship is very getting close, but then this announcement that China is sending a quite high official to this North Korea's ceremony is quite a big deal. So I would like to get some your thoughts on that. Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully that's the case, and the Chinese are meaning to give them a good message. I'm concerned, though, that it may be that China is, as you would expect it to, is to try to balance the two, and not to show too much support for Park Geun-hye, sort of balancing. Obviously, they want to go back, tell Pyongyang what they talked about. So I'm not too surprised, I guess, but it is a little bit hopeful that the Chinese would use this as an occasion to start pushing North Korea in the right direction. I'm not too hopeful yet. I want to see more evidence of that, but I think in this summit, President Park and President Obama should reinforce that kind of message. Not that China is the answer to the problem, but China can certainly help in this problem. And so far it is happening some. China is certainly putting pressure on North Korea in certain ways. It's not really shown clear evidence of working yet. So I'm sure the Chinese are as frustrated as we are and as South Korea is. So this may be kind of a maneuver to try to relieve some of that frustration. Hopefully it's more than that. Hopefully the North Koreans will pick up on the message.
Okay, my opinion is like this. It's a basic model of international politics. China or United States, the U.S. are always pursuing their self-interest. Now, let's think like this. Some analysts say, hey, let's make a buffer zone in Korean Peninsula between two superpowers. What this means? Now, China and the United States will make a buffer zone when the reunification is real, the process is going on. Or they will stand up to some side, stand up to, and the other country will stand up for. This means, I think the reality of international society is very selfish, pursuing their national interest. So if I say, as for the summit, Park Geun-hye and Mr. Obama, then they will show what is most common and profitable way to get each country's national benefits and to achieve the national, the area stability and peace. It's very important and should be solved, but I don't think it could be solved in easy way or easy manner. So Yeonhap report means just the gesture of Beijing's leadership. They could not abandon North Korea because, North Korea is their base of influence in Northeastern Asia. So I was going to say, yes, it could be time to shake a hand, even though it is no low level or high level. This is my opinion.
Okay. Yes, Ambassador.
I'm Diana Lady Williams, the former U.S. ambassador and assistant secretary of state and other things in the U.S. government. But as Mr. Tokala knows, I also had the honor and pleasure of living in Korea when my father was the economic advisor to the first president of Korea. And my grandfather on my mother's side basically was the principal supporter of the Korean government in exile, including donating office spaces to them. So my family's relationship to Korea goes back to 1918. So I have not been to Korea for 20 years, but my love is always still there. And so like everyone else in the room, I know that Korea is a very, very special country and very special people. But as has sort of been alluded to here, not only do we have summit fatigue, but there really is still precious little understanding of Korea in the United States. And I would say Koreans don't even know their own history very well. And that's another whole story. But I think there are several things here that have been brought up. First of all, I was so delighted to see that there was no mention to the six-party talks, and I hope that is so dead and buried. But I think there are a couple of things, and even if they're not on the agenda, I was not aware at all about this health security summit. And that certainly seems to be something that could be threaded as positioning the Republic of Korea as a global player. And with the problems that President Obama has and the criticism related to Iran and all the perceptions of North Korean support in Iran and the Middle East, I think you really have something there that can be both specific and building on something that you've already done. So I would encourage whomever who is encouraging whomever to put that on the agenda. Another thing, and this is a real flight of fancy, and because I first lived in Korea in 1948 across from the Seoul train station where all these refugees were coming from the north, and even though the history is long forgotten in many ways, Korea has one of the most dramatic experiences with refugees of anyone in the world, and also taking in people, and of course as a poor country, unlike the rich European countries. But there might be something related to also at such time, hopefully North Korea is reunified in some way, and the experiences that people are having with refugees, and the fact that you have both the head of the UN and the president of the World Bank as Koreans. It seems like there's something there that should be put together and beyond this bilateral summit. So those are my two thoughts, but again, it's wonderful to hear from all of you.
Okay, one more question, then I'll have to wrap it up. Gentleman here in this row.
My name is Jo Hongjae. I'm interning at the Hudson Institute. I have two questions. One thing is about Japan and China. As many panel mentioned, and also before the first session's speakers mentioned, Korea and U.S. have quite a different point of view towards the Japan and China. For example, about the President Park's attend to the China's military events, military parade, but actually the U.S. is worried about the rising of the militaries in China, and also about Japan. Japan has a significant role in the Obama administration's rebalance to the Asian policy, and maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, Japan has passed the national security bills, but that makes not comfortable to the Koreans, so there could be quite a controversy. But I'm wondering how the Korean and U.S. government should deal with this problem. That is my first question. And second question is about the unification. The Koreans change of the Koreans' perception to unification. Recently, there was a poll from the public poll from Seoul National University's kind of some Peace and Unification Institute. 12% of the 20s and 14% of the 30s answered about the reply to we needed unification. Maybe I think recently there are so many provocation of the North Korea to South Korea about the Yeonpyeong Island or the Cheonan ship, and recently there was some demilitarized zone. There was severe injured to South Korean soldiers. So that made most of the younger generations in South Korea are not like the North Korea. So I'm wondering how does it affect to the policy toward to North Korea? Yeah.
Okay, that's easy. So we have Japan and unification. Who wants to answer those? Bill.
I'll say, well, maybe something on both real quick. On Japan, I think it's important for the Korean side to understand that the U.S. has a huge history with Japan as well. We fought them. We lost many, many hundreds of thousands of soldiers defeating Japan. My grandparents on both sides of my family lived under occupied Japan in China and in Korea. So we have a huge history of really bad history with Japan. But with the atomic bomb and the peace agreement, we've put that history behind us. So I think Korea should maybe take some lessons from that. To me, Japan is a transformed country from it was. And we may be in danger of aggravating them through too much talk about history that you can't replace the history. It's done. So I would suggest be a little careful on the Korean side. On unification, though, I think, to me, the two countries, there's one country. U.S. is fully in support of a unified, democratic, prosperous, and strong Korea. If any one of those four conditions are not there, we're looking at, 100 years ago, more problems. So I don't think there's any wiggle room between what I as an American want for Korea in unification as any Korean would want. The problem is how to get there, and it's not an easy task to get there.
Okay, that'd be the last question. Do other panelists like to take that on? Discuss either Japan or unification?
Probably Japan, you'd disagree.
Yes. Now,
I might.
frankly speaking, I think Japan does not want the reunification of Korean Peninsula. It's the simple answer, but let's think now the superpower, China and the United States. Now, the territorial dispute, for example, the South China Sea. I can't remember those island names, but when you are on the side of Japan, you can call it Japanese Takeshima. No, not Takeshima. What? No. South, yes.
Oh, in South China Sea.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah.
But when you're on the side of China, you call it Chinese. It's very subtle and delicate problem facing our road, our destiny. So reunification could cause a more difficult, complex problems between superpowers or the countries around Korean Peninsula. Yes, the other thing is, yes, we can hope the UN or multilateral parties around the Korean Peninsula could help the reunification. But let's think about the six parties talk.
No.
So I am very pessimistic about the multilateral talks in international political areas. So I cannot give you a clear answer because nobody knows what will happen tomorrow. Good?
If I add just a simple saying on the Korea, Japan, and United States issue, the Korean government is now doing two-track approach. They are implementing the history issue if they make some long comment on the history made by Japanese politicians. But still, the Korean government is now doing some positive things on the other cooperation issues, including the security cooperations. So if Japanese politicians don't make some kind of provocative mentions or activities, and then there would be no serious conflict between countries.
Okay, thank you. We've had a very rich conversation. On behalf of the Korean Economic Institute, I'd like to thank our superb panel. I'd like to thank you all for coming. Give them a hand. And because we're only co-host, perhaps I should give the president of the Hanmi Club a chance to say a closing word too, as our co-host. Mr. Pong.
Thank you, speakers and discussants. I'm always pleased and happy to be amongst you people here, and those who are quite interested in observing the enhancement of the two nations' relations, specifically the two peoples' understanding. We know America. The Americans seem to know somewhat of Korea, but we do not know in actuality and in detail. We should go further to expand our the understanding the arena. And this way, like Hanmi Club, we are just a simple journalist. We are nobody, but we were somebody sometimes. But we are the ones who come forth to do this kind of job, which usually done by diplomats or some business people, hierarchies, and now we are the ones. We are not simply want to be a patriot of any kind, but we need this because America is needed in Korea for two nations relations, for future of two nations, for Korea specifically, because we want to specifically mention that when the Republic of Korea was born in 1948, with what? With the understandings and the support of the American taxpayers, especially the government people and leadership back here in the United States, to which we deeply appreciate until 1950, June 25, we were having the unprovoked war And we were almost smashed down to Busan perimeter. And we almost lost our independence and the sovereignty. Without American help, well, we wouldn't see any KEI, whatever, in today. And afterward, when we were squeezed in by China and Japan, who are the ones who came to our help? American taxpayers, American government, and leaders in every field in the United States. And look at today. Look at Koreans residing in America, in northern part of America, as either citizens or residents. They are really spearheading for the betterment of relationship between two peoples and their children, their grandchildren. Well, we would never expect all that. We couldn't think of sending our kids to Ivy League. Well, when I was a Washington correspondent back in 1960s, our GDP was only $180. Now, $27,000, and nothing changed as yet. Some of people, but to which I have to express my personal thank you, personal appreciation to those unknown Americans who served their country and the country of mine in time for war, in time of peace. And I especially appreciate you all for your coming, especially Mark and Ron, he ran away, but the KEI, which is doing marvelous job for you and for us especially. So for that, we all rise and say hello and goodbye and thank you to Americans and Koreans, two nations of relations, especially Mark. Thank you.